Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. My guest tonight is Lex Reilly, better known as the Australian Viking, a former Australian soldier whose hardest battles didn't happen overseas, but after he came home. After serving in Afghanistan and watching his life slowly spiral, Lex hit a point where he had to choose between ending his story or rewriting it. He found his way back through a radical mix of wilderness, faith, and brutal honesty. Today, Lex leads men into some of the harshest environments on earth to help them confront the chaos inside, to reclaim healthy masculinity and rediscover purpose. He's a guide, a mentor, and a living reminder that courage isn't never breaking. It's what you do after you've been broken. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Let's welcome Mr. Lex Reilly onto the show. Hey, Lex.
Hey,
I'm glad you're here.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
The first Australian officially on Defenders Live. I'm honored.
Me too.
So, where to begin with you? There is so much that we could unpack, and I do want to hear your life story, but I don't want to hear your whole life story. You know what I mean? And I think that there are threads along your path that I would like to kind of go a little bit deeper on, if you would allow that, especially for the audience. I think they would be interested. So let's begin with how I even got you on my radar, and that is through a mutual friend, Ryan, who's been on my show as well. You are, and I don't know if you're still in Montana, but there is a documentary called Peace Wilderness Man that's been running throughout Montana. And this is to help a Gold Star spouse who needs help with fundraising, who's in kind of a tough predicament. And so tell me how all that came about and where you're at now with that. How have those been going?
Oh, all right. So, all right. This is a little bit of an unpack. So, if you can bear with me,
Sure.
I lived 3.5 years in the Arctic Circle and 100 miles in the polar circle of Norway, and that was a tough chapter for me. And when I was leaving the Arctic, I was going to head back to Australia, but I knew I wanted some decompression time before I went back to the friends that I had from the past and my family and loose ends I left when I went to the Arctic. And I felt a call to go to some indigenous medicine called ayahuasca in Colombia and to have some tranquil time in Mexico before and after the medicine in Colombia. And I'd been doing, I would say, like years of work with medicine and self-reflection and nature and therapy and lifestyle changes leading up to this point. And when I was in Colombia, in the ceremony, I received my healing. And when I received my healing, the spirit of ayahuasca spoke to me in the ceremony, and she said, this is how she said it: Wyoming, Montana. And then I hear that, and I just inside myself, I say, okay. And then she says, Wyoming, Montana, November 23rd. And then I hear that, and then I say, okay. And then she says something else, but that's private. And then we come back to Wyoming, Montana, and I say to this spirit ayahuasca, like, what do you mean? Go to Montana on the 23rd, be in Montana on the 23rd. What do you mean? And then the Spirit just said, don't overthink it. Just follow your heart. And that was in November last year. And then I went back to Australia in February. I was sitting into that intention, and it is also, for me, it was a scary thing to trust the Spirit that communicated with me. And I knew that November in Montana would be almost similar to the Arctic with the weather conditions. So a part of me had some dread about how hard that might be again. But throughout the year, I was sitting through what would it mean to follow my heart to Wyoming or Montana in November. And then out of asking that question was the Native American community and the veteran community were the two main communities that I thought it would be within my heart to develop a relationship with. And then I did some outreach in some veteran Facebook groups and in Montana, and I just basically said, I want to come over and volunteer my services. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm here in full service, full send mode. What can we do? And I got referred from one person in this group chat to another, and then eventually to Ryan. And it was a discussion of, hey, someone's made a documentary about me. I also do public speaking, banquets, events that can be quite uncomfortable, but also inspirational and transformative. I've been doing that in Australia. I can offer this to your community. I want nothing in return. How do we go about this? And then Ryan had this opportunity to meet the needs of a Gold Star spouse, Marinda Barreras, basically a couple of days before I had been in touch with him. And so that was quite a synchronicity. And we just started the conversation and intention from there. So we had done 5 events in Montana. The last event was last night in Kalispell, and I'm still in Montana. On Monday, I fly to Colombia again to the same healing center that I went to last year to then have another ceremony with these traditional practices and the medicine of ayahuasca. Yeah, it sounds crazy, and it is crazy to the logical mind, but a lot of how I navigate my life now is just in this, just trusting my life.
Yeah, there was a post I saw on Facebook on your birthday. You wrote a
Yeah,
post.
yeah,
Yeah, and you spoke to that. You spoke to how you were happy that you were able to trust and really have faith now more than ever before, was the synopsis I got. I wanted to read something from that though because I found it really interesting now that you bring that up. There's a part in the post that says, "I genuinely don't know many people as brave with their life as I am. To follow my heart so and to stand in truth no matter for uncertainty or the consequences." Could you unpack that? You don't know many people as brave with their life.
Oof, yeah,
What does that mean?
yeah. For me, with that, there's a difference. I've been able to differentiate between fear and scared, being afraid or being scared. And so one example was I used to be afraid that my ex-wife might take me to court again. And then I kept, out of that fear, I kept all of the legal documents and any evidences that I had to be able to defend myself from that fear. And I had also had fears that I would try to create control around. But then now I don't have fear in my life. I trust my life, but I can feel scared. And for me, that's different. The scaredness is like just sailing into the unknown of my life and often the vulnerability. And one kind of example of that is to come to Montana with this incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly vulnerable message with no idea of how I would be received in a different culture, and to sit with the potential worst case scenario, like maybe what I say is so upsetting that people boo me or want to kind of run me out of town, and then just go, okay, if that is what happens, then I trust that, and I can go towards that. And being brave in my life for me is following my heart, regardless of if my heart has led me through more pain or not. I'm following my heart because I believe that's my soul. That's my
Mm-hmm.
soul's direction. That's my journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's me being free in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I have just had a big focus for years of shedding the scaffolding of control and being brave in the choices that I make. Going to live 100 miles in the Arctic for 3+ years was quite a big decision, a very big decision, not just for like studying, for example, but also to put off any recareering choices and just follow that dream. I'm quite brave in how I follow this. Yeah, I follow my heart.
But you haven't. Okay, I just almost put words in your mouth, Lex, because I wanted to say, but you haven't always been this brave. Is that true?
Yeah, I think I've had bravery in other ways, but now it's more like a heart courage for me. So like
Mm-hmm.
going to Afghanistan is quite brave.
Mm-hmm.
Right, joining the army or the military is brave. But for me, the level of braveness I'm at now in my life is I've become one of the most courageous people I know, and that is also this willingness of the humility to reconcile as best as I can my truth with the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and to ride that truth no matter the consequences. And an example of that was when I started to talk about publicly that I had been domestically violent, and that no one asked me to do that. There was no kind of prompts or coach or people saying that this is a good thing to do, but I just felt a realization of like, yeah, I'm going to stand in that truth, and I'm going to talk about it online openly on all of my platforms. And I'm just purely going to say, I have been domestically violent. I have severely beat my children.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the most disgusting things a man can do. And I have done that. Boom. That was the message. That was what I put out. And that was realizing I'm going to stand in the most uncomfortable truth that I have access to in my life. And that is this thing that I've had a lot of shame and judgment and self-loathing for. And this was like me being violent was like 12 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago off the top of my head. But it's taken a long time for me to let go of self-loathing and to start to heal and forgive myself with that. And then I realized I want to start to talk about this openly. And I was living in a small Arctic town at that point in time. Maybe there was 10 or 12,000 people. And I realized I still had to do this no matter what. And then I went through this process of posting these things on social media. And then, for example, I went to boxing training afterwards. And that for me to be in truth there, then I go up to the boxing coach and I say, am I welcome to train here? And that's like so vulnerable to ask him that. But that's me being so open and so courageous and just saying, hey, like, I'm sure he's seen what I posted. A lot of people in the town had. And then I asked if he would welcome me into his training hall where we're boxing. And I was also accepting of potentially being rejected or shunned or losing friendships, whether they were close or shorter term, or having maybe my family judge me if that was a possibility. But to stand in my truth at all costs has become a way of how I navigate my life now, but that can be scary. But the scaredness for me is linked to a level of faith and freedom and becoming more of my essence, more of who I am. Whereas the fear is more this mindset of I need to control this situation somehow to manage the fear.
That's what I was just getting ready to say, because you still have fear now, but it comes from a different place and it's managed differently. So you had fear before, and I'm interjecting here, I'm speculating, because a person, in my opinion, who is domestically violent, who's a violent person, is a very scared and angry person who, in my opinion, does not have emotional control over themselves. And I've been around people like that before. And I used to be afraid of those people. I look at those people now with sadness because I see what's really going on, which is they have such a need to be in control that they're out of control. Like they just cannot, at least the people that I've experienced that way, are very, all of the things in my experience that are spouting out of people like that are really words they're saying to themselves. And that's why when I look at people that way who lack emotional control, who project everything onto everyone else and spew toxicity all over everyone else, it comes from a really sick heart, in my opinion. And so, from that perspective, where was the moment where you recognized that you had a sick heart that needed to be healed, and then had the courage to take the step to move forward? Because there's always a pivotal moment, I believe.
So it was a couple of years after Afghanistan, maybe 2 years, and I don't recall if there was a particular incident, but I had just been repeatedly losing control of my everything, my response, my reaction. And I can understand it a bit better now, like to do with the PTSD symptoms and the amygdala, like the fear center of the brain, and the fight response. But I was just incredibly aggressive with my children in the home, and that aggression, as my health was getting worse, that aggression was increasing, and it transitioned from verbal to being heavy-handed to being incredibly violent. And at that point in time, and we didn't know how to handle this as a family, and a wider family didn't know how to handle this. And so my wife and I think were just having some really uncomfortable, we can call them maybe arguments or discussions, and we're just navigating this. Again, this is like, let's say 12 years ago, with our own stuff coming up, and me being afraid to be vulnerable, and her afraid of the tension in the family. But then we're arguing, counterattacking, and blaming, and it's this whole mess. But I knew that I needed to somehow change what was happening, and I started doing anger management courses that were available in the Australian veteran welfare system, and some maybe it could have been anxiety management courses, and it's both of those were basically through awareness training and self-regulation. But that was the point to understand of like, I can't just expect this to go away now. I try to work it away for 2 years after Afghanistan, or drink it away, and it hadn't miraculously disappeared, and it had started to creep further and further into my daily life. And that was, yeah, when my wife and I eventually, I think I'm going to say I gave in, because it was my stubbornness which was perpetuating the problem. But I probably gave in to accepting that I was at fault and I needed to do something to change.
You took responsibility for it.
Yeah. I had always taken responsibility for it because I knew, but my initial response to responsibility was hating myself and judging
Mm,
myself and beating
yeah.
myself up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like this kind of internal blame
Mm-hmm.
and some level of responsibility. But I would say when I started to do these courses, it was more of an external acknowledgement. And it's a super, like, the most uncomfortable thing I've ever experienced is to talk about out loud, like, hey, I'm beating my kids.
Mm,
I don't want to do this. I don't know
right.
how to stop it. I'm afraid of who I am. How do I change this? How do I stop hating myself? How do I stop being so destructive? Saying that out loud takes a lot of courage. Uh,
Yeah.
but that was the kind of this starting to put action to this growing of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But almost none of this journey for me has been linear. So things can get better, then they can get worse, and then it
Mm-hmm.
look like it's just what it was before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not exactly the same. And it's
It's
maybe,
messy.
yeah, it's been messy for me. It's been
Yeah.
cyclic. I've stumbled and faltered, and
It sounds like the ongoing theme, though, here is honesty. It's like when you finally became really honest with yourself
yeah,
about what was really going on, and perhaps, and then having a humble heart to reach out and be like, I don't know. I don't know how to fix this. I don't like, like coming to the end of yourself, almost.
yeah.
It seems like that might be part of it. And it sounds like going out into the wilderness. Now, so how does that tie into this? Because have you always had a tie to nature and the wilderness, or how did that enter into the equation? Or am I jumping too far ahead?
No, so I've always had a relationship with nature, and that was very present when I was young. I was quite adventurous and I was quite in the bush. Like, it's the woods, but in Australia we
I
call it
can
the
relate
bush.
to this, Lex.
Yeah, okay.
That was my escape as a kid too.
Yeah, yeah. When I was in the army, I was in the infantry, and then eventually I specialized as a reconnaissance patrol commander. And that basically means that we're in very small, very quite elite teams in a specialist capability. And for the most part, our survival is dependent on our ability to remain undetected. So we were really harnessing these skills to just move very phantom like through nature. And I didn't realize at the time, but that was actually some kind of skill that I overlooked, or a connection that I overlooked. When So I had medically discharged from the army, and I was really struggling after that. There was actually 5 years after Afghanistan, and then things were getting even worse than what they did when I was first violent with my kids, right? And so I moved out of the army into low income housing, and then I lose my identity as quite a prestigious, reconnaissance patrol commander, Corporal Reilly, and then now I feel like a veteran loser. My body hurts. My mind is quite incapable. I was smoking a pack of Marlboro Reds each day. Most days I would use marijuana. Most days I would use alcohol to manage my emotions. I was really struggling with depression. I couldn't take care of the responsibility of my dishwasher. One time I sent my kids to school where all they had was like carrots and frankfurts, like these little wiener hot dog things. That was just the best that I could do, and that was quite pathetic, but that was really the best that I could do. And I was also going through a divorce that was very triggering for this fight and flight and for my livelihood, as well as on a really high dosage of antidepressants. And so
Wow.
I had a lot of these risk factors for domestic violence, suicide. Yeah, like I had the works kind of
Mm.
for this high risk stuff. And I wasn't handling life well at all. And my violence with my children was just increasing. Eventually, the Department of Childcare Services came to my house and they said, "Hey, your kids aren't safe with you.
Mm.
You're not allowed to see them yet. You're allowed to call them, but there's a process now for you to see your kids."
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't
And
imagine what that would feel like.
that was, well, an interesting thing is I know I was traumatizing my kids when I was beating them. I was also traumatizing myself
Mhm.
because I was disgusted at my behavior and I hated how I was showing up, and I didn't have the power within myself or the skills or resources within myself to stop that,
Mhm.
nor was I able to just stop these addictive substance dependencies. So I was out of control and I didn't know how to get help. When I had the childcare services come and say, basically they said, like you're not a particularly good person, you can't have your kids, here are some pamphlets, see you later. And then
Wow.
that's the gist of that. And then that was like, yeah, what? How do I fix this? I can't fix this. I feel so alone. I feel so lonely. I
Mm.
I feel crushed. I'm doing something. No one. I don't think anyone is thinking, "Hey, I'm excited to go home and beat my kids."
Mhm.
No one is saying themselves, I'm looking forward to going and shouting at my kids. Like that's not, I don't think anyone says that. And so I was internally suffering and I was putting that suffering onto my family.
Mm.
And then when I lost access to my kids, I realized that the only reason I hadn't killed myself before was because of my kids. And now my kids aren't here.
Mm.
Okay, I need to do something quite drastic. And the psychologist wasn't working, the antidepressants weren't working in the sense of transforming my life. Just trying to pressure myself to transform wasn't happening either. So I sold what I could, I gave away the rest, and I was still in quite a financially hard situation. But my logic was, if I was capable of doing complex sniper missions in Afghanistan with a 4-man team and outnumbered by local population, and the nearest coalition support is a mile away. If I had the courage to do that and the capability to do that, but now I feel scared to go to the shops and I feel too tired to go to my letterbox, maybe, and I don't recommend this same logic to anyone else, but it was, for me, it was, maybe I need to put myself back in a life and death situation so that I'll choose life.
Wow.
And that was when I went into the wild.
Huh. I didn't see that coming, Lex.
Yeah.
That's profound. And that's what you did.
Yeah. So I took a backpack to New Zealand, and I went there in winter, and I just spoke to local experts, and I said, where can I go in the bush that I won't see anyone the entire time I'm there?
Hmm.
And so the first guy said, yep, this is a summer track. You're going in winter. It's going to be covered in snow. It's going to be hard to navigate. No one's going to go there. And then for me, I'm like, good. I won't see anyone. And then I'll
So
go.
what did you do? You just took off and survived.
Yeah, so I just had a backpack, and I took food for the time, and a map and a compass, but I didn't have a safety plan. I didn't have emergency accommodation, because for me, it was like, well, I don't necessarily need that, because if I don't find the will to live, I'll probably kill myself on my couch. So dying in the bush in the middle of nowhere is at least more exotic than just the actual genuine risk factor than what there was at home. I was reckless. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live, but I knew, like, looking at the logic of it, it's like going into the middle of nowhere where it is life and death, and there is, snow and ice and avalanche and uncertainty. That's probably less risk factor in this exact scenario, less risk factor I'll die there than what I would on my couch, because that's almost guaranteed.
Are you surprised by what you learned by going on that journey?
It surprised me at the time. I felt in that 3 days, 4 days out there, I felt like a something spiritual. And to give that context, I had been incredibly emotionally numb since Afghanistan, like incredibly emotionally numb. All I had felt since Afghanistan was adrenaline when I started doing nightclubs, because I wanted to fight people, right? Because I felt dead inside.
Mm.
And I had felt stress and anger and hungry. That was the main spectrum of emotions. I used alcohol to fabricate joy and to fabricate laughter. I think that's quite a common thing. But I'd felt nothing essentially for a long time. So then to go out into the wild, where I was essentially deprived of external stimulus, and then to feel something spiritual, that was something I hadn't thought was possible. And that was like very pleasurable, not only just a pleasurable emotion in that period of time, but to feel something genuinely spiritual in anyone's life can be a very powerful moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then so for me, it was kind of like seeing a candle in the dark night of the soul.
So you found some hope.
Exactly. That's the word. Was I found hope, and then I knew that wasn't like the end of the journey, but it was hope on the journey.
Mm. That's wild. Because what I was thinking, and I was somewhat right, which is I'm thinking, okay, this man who's been through, I know you had a tumultuous childhood, right? And I know that you were in the military. So I imagine you're familiar with adrenaline, you're familiar with challenge. You probably like that, I imagine, or at least you've become good at it. So it's familiar and something, that you like. And so it makes logical sense to me that you would go on an excursion or an endeavor that would challenge you in those kind of ways, that there would be uncertainty. It's just really interesting to me that the uncertainty, and maybe it's not in your mind described this way, the types of uncertainties you found yourself in everyday life after being in the military versus the uncertainties you find in the wilderness. There's uncertainty either way, right? And unpredictability, but it's a particular type of challenge, it seems like, that lights some kind of fire back inside of you, you know? And I think maybe the key, and correct me if I'm wrong, the key, it sounds like, was isolation, ironically. Like getting away from the noise and distractions from all of the substances that you were using to numb. Actually, you said you were numb on the inside, but that were just being used or abused when you went out into the wilderness. Again, I would say the word honesty. It's like there is something about nature that it just is what it is,
Mm.
right? There's honesty about it. There's clarity about it, I think. And I've found being alone in the wilderness for me is a very clarifying place. It's a place where it doesn't feel like there's so much gray area. It feels like there's more black and white to me, and I actually like that.
Mm.
So, and I also, to some degree, although it sounds funny, is I actually like that I'm not in control of anything around me, right? I can't control anything around me necessarily. Like nature is nature and it will be what it will be, and I can only control myself. And that's really how life is. But I think that sometimes, from my experience anyway, I get this notion, this illusion that I have control of things that I don't have control over. And
Mm.
that's where the madness comes in for me. So I don't know if that's what you experienced, but it's really fascinating. Your story is just amazing, and you've learned so much. So before we jump any further, I have this I've had it from the beginning since you told me about your past. I want to know, have you healed the relationship with your children?
No.
No.
Yeah. So I showed up as best as I could to support healing in that relationship. And I had done through the court process, the government recommended certain programs for education called like the Circle of Security to learn how to create secure functioning relationships. And another one was the Parenting Orders program to just learn how to relate more effectively with the other parent in the equation of that. And a lot of my own healing as well. But recently, the last couple of years, I was presented with my children where they wanted to change their last name to the last name of their mother and their father figure, who was their mother's husband. And that was probably something no one ever wants to receive, right? But then I sit into that and I, reflect on what is the the greatest thing for me to do here, what is from my higher self in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, like, yeah, I'll support my children to change their last name. And then I knew that that would lead towards an adoption application from them. And then I start the process of, kind of soothing myself that this journey is, well, the chapter in this journey is concluding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I support that process. And maybe it was 6 or 7 months ago that the adoption was actually finalized. And
Mm.
we haven't had contact for some years now.
I feel bad for asking that question now that isn't the answer I thought I would hear.
Yeah, I can understand that. And it's a rough question and it's a rough answer.
How old are they now, may I ask?
20, 18, 16, and 14.
Wow. Four of them.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you still have hope?
I trust my life. I trust God's plan. I I hope that they're well. I trust their mother and their now father. I know that they love them. I know they provide for them. And it's not that I have hope or I don't hope. I would love to be a part of their life when they're ready for that.
Mm.
But I don't need it to be any particular way because I trust God.
Hmm. I'm processing.
Yeah, I get that.
I don't know why, but as you were speaking, I got really angry. I don't even know you. I don't know your story, but I got really angry. I actually got angry for you for whatever happened to you when you were a kid,
Mm,
because I know for a fact that whatever that was affected you deeply and informed many of your patterns of thinking and behavior later on in your life. And that's part of my and my husband's journey and struggle, has been to work to break some generational curses. And I know a lot of people that are on that same path who have gained awareness in their life about why they act the way they do, why they think the way they do, where a lot of that comes from, and and have dug in and done some hard work in that
mm.
area to reconcile that and to heal a lot of those parts of themselves that just were abandoned, were abused, were neglected. And that takes courage. So I commend you for what you've done, and my heart breaks for you, for your family, that you're not able to be close with your kids. So I pray that that in the future is a possibility. Whew. This is a hard one for me. I usually the interviews don't get to me quite this much. It's funny because I think really the things that are reflected in people on my show sometimes bring up things for me. And even though I might not have exactly the same past that they had, there's some sort of an energy or this something that I can connect to with a complete stranger sometimes, and just in some small way know them. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure
Yeah.
you've had that on some of your journeys with the men that you've mentored.
Yeah, everything is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm able to see myself in someone else, there is a knowing there that transcends intellect. It's like, ah, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the intricacies. I don't know the ins and outs of the story, but everything is energy and I can feel that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That anger took me for a loop there for a second.
Yeah, thanks for sitting into that anger and thanks for communicating that.
I didn't see that coming either. Okay. So you're out on this backpacking trip in the middle of nowhere, New Zealand,
Yeah.
and was was there where I guess I'm trying to define where was this turning point. So you were in this headspace of you were thinking about committing suicide. You went on this trip. Like, where was this turning or moment where things started to turn a different direction for you? Was this all just by yourself, or were there people that helped you see these things? I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, these epiphanies in nature have been when I've been out with myself and I've been relatively destinationless.
Mm,
And so there was this first, when this pivotal time in New Zealand, there was this first trip which was in like quite a rainforest, but with snow. And then there was a second trip where it was out through an avalanche zone by a glacier. And that was quite dangerous, like with the stones coming from the mountain and the way the snow was over them was genuinely dangerous. And like my shoes fell apart while I was out there. And then I get to this small shelter and I just have a couple of days there with myself. And it was the first time that I've had this divine input and just time to have less pressure on my mind, right? Because ironically, it seemed like less pressure to be making life and death decisions, whether it's caught in a whiteout or scrambling up a quite precarious cliff, versus how do I pay my bill on time because
mhm,
stress is so disabling for my mind and I've got overdue electricity bills and I can't work this out. So when I was having these ancient problems in nature, it was kind of exfoliating for my thought process to be able to just focus on things mindfully.
mm,
And that, I'm going to say, that relationship with Mother Earth, like her divinity, started to allow me perspective. And also, I didn't realize this, but when I was out in this trip in New Zealand was when I realized the relationship I developed with Mother Earth in the army that I overlooked, and what I had developed in the childhood. But then I didn't have the words like this at that point in time, but I know it now. I felt emotionally safe when I was a part of the planet that I knew it was almost impossible for anyone else to be at. And
that makes sense.
yeah, it was the only time I felt emotionally safe was when I was somewhere so hard to get that
Mhm.
I was the only person there.
Wow. That that brings sadness to my heart to hear that.
Yeah, I
That
get
that's
that.
the extreme you had to go to feel that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't still feel that way, do you?
No, I have learned how to establish safety, like with a couple key friends that
Yeah.
I take like my vulnerability to, and I can come to them in the energy of a distraught child or to
Mhm.
help
And they can
unpack.
handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah. You have to have people like that in your life.
yeah,
Yeah. There's some guys that are gonna be listening to this right now, and they're gonna be hearing the words emotional safety and vulnerability, and they're all of their macho-ness is gonna come up. Their egos are gonna start saying or thinking, "You know this, right?" What do you say to those guys?
like genuinely, I, for the most part, I'm incredibly masculine. Like I had a boxing match at the start of the year. I did really well in that boxing match. I had the courage to fight a man with the same size and same skill as me in front of 100 plus people. Like that's an incredibly masculine thing. That's kind of an epitome of masculinity in our civilization, is that I've done that. I also have the courage to sit into my emotions and to be with them and to not reach for a beer bottle or to not reach for sport or distracting conversation or to not rescue myself by blaming someone. I am so courageous now compared to how I was so many years ago. And most of the men that I talk to that are full with their identity are having the capacity to be with their emotions and to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm really honestly upset with the culture that men have grown up in, that have told them what weakness looks like and what strength looks like, because it is so messed up. So messed up and so unfair. And it has destroyed many men. And it makes my heart hurt to know that there are men out there who are what we consider to be manly men, who have been so brave and courageous in so many ways that are considered okay in our culture, and yet in the ways that they need to be taken care of and needs need to be met from an emotional level or vulnerability perspective, that all has just been dismissed. And it is so unfair, and it angers me so much that all of that has just been swept under the rug, and by parents, starting from a young age, just rub some dirt on it, you'll be okay, suck it up, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about, all that bullshit. Honestly, like, I really want to go on a tirade here. That does not help them become great men, great leaders, great spouses, great fathers. It really doesn't. And it's a huge disservice, I think. And I think that for many men is part of that generational curse, and something I think that if more men could overcome, there could be this more richness to that masculinity to be a serving husband and father. And I think that's what most men want to be.
Mm.
I really think so. But I think that many are just so lost, and it's ironic that you found yourself in the place most people would consider lost.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so then how did you get from, and fill in any blanks if you need to, but how did you get from starting to go through this process of self-discovery to then eventually getting to a place where you're like, I can't just hold this in and keep this all to myself. I need to share this with other people.
Yeah. So when I came back from New Zealand, for example, right, this pivotal experience, I I started to meditate, right, using these guided apps. I could only meditate for like 3 minutes because just being with my mind was so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I could do 5 minutes if I was stoned by the beach, right? Like it was just so uncomfortable, but this was the edge for me to really meet myself and to start to rebuild my life brick by brick and to change the conversations I would have with people, the music I would listen to, how I would socialize, how I would eat, my sleep cycles. I just had a willingness to review all of that. And I had an awareness that the rigidity of my mind and my identity of who I perceived I was the cause of a lot of friction and challenges and like drag in the sense of aerodynamics of life. When I had a relationship with a Lithuanian American, and I come to Illinois and Michigan last year to have some time with her. That relationship concluded. In the aftermath of that relationship, I realized that there was a part of me that was looking for her to permit me self forgiveness.
Hmm.
And it's, I think it's certainly okay in relationships for us to support each other's healing and to show up for each other and maybe love parts of each other that the other couldn't love or whatever. That's the healing power of love. But I realized that, yeah, I was looking for her reflection for me to forgive parts of myself and to love parts of myself. And after that relationship, I went to do psilocybin therapy in the Netherlands. And this is just last year in the Northern Hemisphere summer. So July or August last year. And I had I had the first treatment of psilocybin, like mushroom therapy, basically. It's quite a spiritual setting, but we had psychologists and psychiatrists there as well. So it was clinical spiritual. And the first sitting with the medicine I had there was good. But I said to the guides, I said, I don't want to have any distance between my conscious and my subconscious. I don't want to have any control. If my body wants to shit itself, let me shit myself. That was like the level of surrender that I just wanted. I don't want any control over my mind. I want to be fully with this medicine process. And I had an archetypal death there. I had panic and death come over me in that, and it's as real as anything else. In fact, it's more real often with these psychedelics or psychoactive experiences. And so I died, but there was a spiritual death, and that led to a healing with me, with how I relate with women, because I was looking for relationships to fill a part of my emptiness. And in the reflection of that, I realized that I loved myself enough to stand in the truth of my path. And I wanted to draw a line in the sand, I suppose, to see like who can be with me on this journey in life if I'm honestly completely who I am. And a part of who I am is my creation story and my past. I am not my past. No one is their past. It's a part of the path, though. And that healing and reflection within myself was like, yeah, I deserve to live in truth and to just let everyone in my community know that this was a part of my story. And then that was prompting the posting on the social media about being violent. And so I did that post, for example, and then I knew I would be too sensitive to check social media.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so I didn't check it. I would just go and literally lay down and hold my heart and soothe myself, and just soothe myself and say, like, it's okay if people don't accept you for how you showed up. It's okay if people judge you for who you were 12 years ago. You love yourself, you accept yourself, you're going to stand in this, and you choose you. And so that was a period of like 5 days just doing that. And then I don't know if I checked the post's comments afterwards but then I did another post of talking about how I cheated on my wife. Again, just a very factual thing. I cheated on my wife. That was kind of it. And then I soothed myself through that. And then I did another post saying that I'd used cocaine and alcohol to feel alive and to feel joy and to feel like life could be pleasurable, or whatever I said, just super factual stuff. And then I would just soothe myself after it.
That's insane. I know many people that won't even post on social media about the good stuff. They're scared of even posting like any level of vulnerability or exposure from the public.
Yeah.
If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs. That is next level.
That was what it meant for me to fully accept myself and to fully like show up in self-love is just to shine the light on that part of my path, and to just stand in that, to show everyone that, and then to show myself like I'm okay. And that ironically was what started the conversations with my male peer group, for them to say like, you are the most courageous man I've ever met. And I got messages like that from my mates just continuously, like, you were so courageous. Some guys were kind of concerned on my behalf, like, hey, are you sure you should be doing this? But most of the guys were just seeing my courage and just saying like, you are so courageous to talk about that openly online.
That's the truth, yeah.
Whew.
That's what the funny thing is about courage, is that I think people think that being courageous feels like courage, but it doesn't. Right?
I was more scared to talk about how Afghanistan affected me than I was scared in Afghanistan. I was certainly scared in Afghanistan. There were nights I fell asleep with a rifle on my chest, right? And one eye open because we're in an incredibly vulnerable position. Or I'd been literally woken up with bullets coming into the rooms we were sleeping in. Like, just incredibly scary stuff, also very damaging to the central nervous system. I had friends get killed in my platoon there. Just really, really genuinely scary stuff. But actually, the way more scary thing was to start to talk about how much it affected me, how scared I was. In Afghanistan, I couldn't have talked openly about these things scaring me. I just pretended I wasn't scared. I think that was common, to pretend that these things didn't affect us, but it did. But the courage for me now is in the vulnerability and the truth. Yeah, and letting my identity potentially being impacted by what's really there.
Few people are willing to be that courageous.
I think it's like this true warrior spirit is like I've integrated the warrior energy, where I don't have, like, shame doesn't exist in my life now, because I just live in the truth now of things. I can feel embarrassed, I can feel uneasy, but I don't have shame anymore. It's like that beast is slain, because I've just perpetually opened up and shine the light of truth onto these things that have otherwise strangled my energy. And yeah, we do this in men's work in Australia, like just supporting men to face their own shame. And it's usually quite an enlightening process. And then there is the realization of what spiritual courage is, or emotional courage, and what it means to have that in other areas of our life. You were talking before about this kind of realm of masculinity, this strong energy, and I really value classical masculine traits, and I really admire them, and I worship them within myself and when I see them in other people. But then there is kind of a but then, but the masculinity requires this softness and this ability to like admit collapse and admit failure, and to look at self-judgment or shame or vulnerability or weaknesses or fault.
Mm-hmm.
Say that was to have the courage to say, hey, I did that. I wasn't proud of that. I'm not aligned with that. I'm sorry. Most men would rather lose relationships than say they're sorry from a genuine position of sorrow.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of another interview I did with a man named Jeremy Morris. I should hook you up with him. He has an organization in Idaho where he takes men, not in extreme wilderness situations like you do, but around a campfire in the wilderness. And his organization is called Wild Courage.
Yeah.
And they sit around a campfire and just say the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I think you guys, yeah. I think you guys would get along well. You said something that I had to write down that you said it and then you just kind of went on, and I wanted to stop you, but I don't like interrupting people. And you said, no one is their past.
Yep.
I don't believe a majority of people really believe that. They might say they do, but they don't operate like they believe it.
Mm.
I think a lot of people just live unconsciously exhibiting the same experience over and over again in different ways, and but they aren't aware that that's what's happening. And so I think a lot of people actually do live their past over and over again unless they bring an awareness to it, which sounds deep and woo-woo, but it's really not. How does a person who's listening to all the things we're saying, maybe they're curious and maybe they don't quite understand it, but maybe they're curious. They're like, okay, maybe they're onto something here, what small steps could they take to lean into being more uncomfortable and being more courageous in their life in small ways?
I just want to acknowledge what you said, like with the perpetuation of past habits and past decisions, and that is someone almost deciding to live the energy of the past continuously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in that way, because it's easy to say, oh no, I've changed. But then I think everyone's heard someone say that and be like, oh
Oh
no,
yeah.
you haven't.
Right.
Because willpower plays such a small part of transformation. I think willpower is like maximum 5 to 10%.
It's as much as motivation, probably.
Yeah, you reckon? Like,
Everybody thinks they need more motivation.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
If I operated on motivation, I would never do anything.
yeah,
I wouldn't get much done.
yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was really struggling with depression and my mind, I really wanted more motivation, but I think it's more I just had so much energy fighting myself,
Mm-hmm.
and when I tended to that fight, I didn't need motivation because the energy could be redirected. Back to what you were saying, like for some little steps. Yeah, I had a friend in this men's group I've been a part of, and I think men's work can be really potent. But he had a burnal, right? So he had a journal that he would burn.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so I think even like writing down the full, no blame, no victim, no bullshit, no story, just the full truth
Mm-hmm.
into a burnal, and then just even just witnessing that for a glimpse is a start, and then burning that page, because the fear can be that someone finds that journal and then makes judgments of that person from the journal and takes it outside of the context of whatever it was written down. So I think a journal
Great
is
idea.
a safe way for someone to start that process, because I think truth is so powerful, but it's really uncomfortable. What it has been for me, and I've seen it for most people, but then also vulnerability can attract the carry on, the vultures,
Oh
the
yeah.
the scavengers, the emotional scavengers, who either want to rescue someone or give them advice, or judge them.
Or take advantage.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that vulnerability, which in its own way is like this quite a pure childlike energy, right? It is very take advantageable, and it can attract the unintegrated predatorial or scavenger energy in someone else. But a burnal is like a safe start to that.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about guys who, well, maybe not everybody knows this. Let's not assume everybody knows this, Lex.
Mhm.
Why is the path to truth through getting uncomfortable?
So
Or if you don't believe that, then say what you think is true.
yeah, I'd say two things to that, because it's I looked at discomfort in a particular way, and I think it's been popularized as well that you need to get uncomfortable to grow. But if someone's central nervous system, if they're always uncomfortable, even in their home, they're uncomfortable, they don't particularly need more discomfort. They need
Point.
support to create comfort. And, there's this saying that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. For me, life begins in the womb, which is the most nourished and safest place that we can ever exist in. And then if I was constantly trying to push myself like I was after the army, and I was competing against the ghost of my former identity, that I was able to accomplish that identity within a mega structure of the military. So then as an individual ex-military, I'm trying to compete with my past. It's just always falling short of that while I was trying to compete like that. But I realized that I perpetuated so much struggle just by trying to push myself all the time, and by not having emotional safety in my home, by not being able to just sit at home for a couple of days and do nothing. I felt I always had to do something. I always had to push myself.
Yeah.
I think that that's also almost like an undercurrent for most people's lives, is just being so busy and pushing to get to the gym, pushing for work, trying to show up as the best all the time. Nature doesn't grow every day. It fluctuates in the seasons, and that's so obvious. Like, I wouldn't expect a tree to be growing in winter, but I would somehow in my mindset pressure myself to try to grow every day, because I'd listened to something motivational on YouTube, and I thought then I should be able to grow every day, as opposed to looking at my seasons. So that there is this like epiphany of me realizing that I can grow so much more if I create this comfort zone, not as a comfort zone on my couch eating a pizza, because
Yeah.
that's this subtle self-destruction, this normalized self-destruction. And I don't mean that doing that once a month is going to impede, but if that is a lifestyle that someone is used to, or it's coming home after work and having several beers every day to relax, that is this comfort, which is the slow death. But then the emotional comfort and that emotional safety, because I hadn't had deep emotional safety most of my life. And I was replicating that in my romantic relationships or my professional relationships. And then ultimately, I realized that I wasn't safe with myself because of how I would betray myself, or I would quit smoking 80 times, or I would say I wouldn't drink again, or I would go into relationships that my best interests weren't considered by my partner, for example. I was just so self betraying, but that was my default.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I've been through this healing process of addressing that default to become safe within myself, because everyone I attract into my life is just a mirror of how I relate with myself. That that wisdom did come through me putting myself into these uncomfortable gauntlets, right? And I realize now, because it's not necessarily that I put the cart before the horse, but I think if I was going to support someone to be able to transform their life in 1 year instead of 14 years, I would help them build a stable emotional home and then step into the truth and the gauntlet of truth. And I think when I was going through these processes of being vulnerable and honest and putting these emotions out, mainly in the context of men, but I'd done Tantra course as well. And people can often think that Tantra is about like group sex, and that's not what it's about. Or just breath work and sex. It's really more about energy and how I related with my body, and also the numbness that I had in my body. It helped me to understand that. But something that came out of that was realizing how I didn't feel emotionally safe with women, which was a big thing, because women are half the planet. Like roughly something like that, right? But so I went through a surrender process at the Tantra course for a week, which was just this super vulnerable thing where I chose to actually I was naked in this circle. I chose to be naked because I wanted to be vulnerable, have no armor, no protection, to stand in front of the circle and to say I didn't feel safe with women. This was maybe 5 years ago, but this was this process of me going into this truth. And there's no room for story there or blame. It's just like, I don't feel safe with women. Boom, that's the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very uncomfortable, more so because of the lack of story there. I'm not saying, well, I had this from my ex-partner and the teacher at school did that. It's just like, no, bam, I don't feel safe with women emotionally. And that truth on its own is way more powerful, but way more naked, because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have the scaffolding of blame.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in that, whether it was that Tantra training I did or other events where I've stood into truth in my life, it's that similar feeling of, I feel so much more like unheld because I don't have the scaffolding of blame.
Mm-hmm.
But that then, when I sit in that, I can feel the power of that. And for me, like, truth and discomfort have often come with each other. I don't know if I've kind of steered away from physical discomfort or more into social, spiritual, emotional discomfort. But I also think that, like, truth is in this energy of divinity. Divinity speaks in truth.
Mm-hmm. If there's anyone watching right now who's has questions for you or just wants to reach out to you, I know you eventually, are you going back to Australia?
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
if they're from the US and they want, I guess what I'm asking is, the point is, do you have any services you offer people remotely?
I'm I'm looking into how I can do that. I'm certainly curious for like Montana based or US based, for example, for me to come back here in person, but how I can
Okay.
support online. Like most of what I'm doing in 2026 supporting men is a blend of online courses and then in-person courses, because
Okay.
I think being in person is great, but then
Yeah.
to be able to fit into someone's daily life now, most things are best to be able to be accessed online. But I can do that. I can do online, definitely.
I just put your website up. For those of you that are listening and not watching, his website is Australian-Viking.com. You can go check him out there. So you do have some classes that you offer, and so people can learn about that on the website?
Um, no,
Oh.
not on my website. They can just learn about how awesome I am on my website. I don't have the programs on my website, but if
Okay.
I will often post that stuff on my social media, like when I'm trying to get people together. But if someone wants to just message me on Instagram or Facebook and be like, "Hey, when you spoke, I listened and I felt that. I think you can support me on my journey." That's the
Yeah.
easiest point. Or if someone wants to like investigate more, the podcasts or the YouTube or Instagram is a really good way to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to make sure that people can connect with you if they want to or need to. We kind of hopscotched around a lot of different areas today. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to make sure that the audience knows about you, or anything you might think would be helpful to them?
Yeah, I'm curious as to how I can be a great guest on your podcast and support your community. So if you can help me with answering that question, I wonder myself maybe what's some common friction points or challenge points that your community has.
Yeah, I think that, as I told you before, a majority of my demographic is men. And the topic of vulnerability, I had another gentleman on who openly admitted he was really uncomfortable with the word. He just really was. And he's former military and law enforcement, and I appreciated his honesty
Mm,
with that. And I think his point really was there's a time and place for it, which I agree with. Like you said, you talked about creating a safe emotional space. I'm wondering, is that safe emotional place intrinsic or extrinsic, right? Is it I'm around the campfire with my buddies, that's a safe emotional place? Or is that safe emotional place something that you've created inside yourself that no matter where you go in the world, you have that? Do you know what I mean?
mm. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to say that most people, men or women, have not been emotionally safe. And what that means is if I bring an emotion to someone like a crying baby, they just hold it. They don't try to fix me. They don't judge me. They don't try to refer me to their acupuncturist or an article they've read or a book or whatever. And part of the challenge is that men, they kind of pretend to themselves like they have a community which is great for them. And the guys get together with their buddies and they have a couple beers and then they open up, but then it's not it's not in ritual, it's not particularly powerful, it's sideways talking, and
Mhm,
it's not the pathway for a man to claim his power.
mhm,
And I think that with generally in the Western culture, we're having this issue of men not being in their grounded power, and there is this misconception of guys. It's an edge of cowardice to not live in truth and to not have friends that you can be genuinely vulnerable with, who have the capacity to just hear your emotion and not fix, not judge, not project, not blame, not hold it against you. And it's from what I've seen, it's a genuinely difficult path for men to come to that place within themselves, but that echoes out to their relationships. I was doing some forum mining before I came to Montana, understanding what people are saying on forums anonymously from the comfort of their couch or after a breakup or whatever. And I think that there is a lot of emotionally exhausted women here in this kind of cowboy country because the men are not having the emotional capacity to do the work at home. They're meeting the family emotions by trying to solve it, by trying to fix it, by trying to give their missus advice, probably because they feel uncomfortable with her emotion.
You nailed that one on the head. Yeah. Again, I need to hook you up with Jeremy because he is from the cowboy culture, the lifestyle, and that's exactly the audience that he's speaking to because that's the life that he has lived and experienced. And I have a good taste of that myself, and I would concur with your conclusion. And I don't know very many men personally in that particular lifestyle that would listen to this podcast, would give it the time of day, honestly, and B, if they did take any steps, and I don't want to say anything bad about them, I'm just saying my experience of those men is that it's a hard nut to crack. They are very prideful, hardworking men who it's been that way for so long through so many generations. It would be incredibly inspiring to see work like that in that community, but it would be one of the hardest, I think, to get through to. And I hope that you do, and I hope that Jeremy does, and I know he's doing good work. But yeah. And you're right. This is not something only men can benefit from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not at all. This is a human thing.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. I
human thing.
think it's part of a collective conscious like ascension
Mm-hmm.
where we're overcoming certain paradigms, like culture wide, human wide,
Mm-hmm.
and a stubborn man might be afraid of dinting his pride, but it's his family that carries that suffering. It's his wife that feels lonely, that can't trust him because he's not following his heart and he's not able to hold her emotions, so she can't surrender fully to him, which then keeps the relationship stuck. It might function, but it's not this flourishing of love. Most guys that I talk to, they want oneness, they want love. They want their wife to look at them with the big doughy eyes of adoration. And the most beautiful thing about a woman is how she looks at her man. And every man wants to be seen as her hero. But when he's hiding from his emotions, that's an edge of cowardice. And she can sense that. She might not consciously know it, but there'll be arguing, there'll be cold shoulders, there'll be testing, there'll be games. There won't
Mm-hmm.
be this divine energy within a relationship. And I think a big focal point where I'm here to support men is to learn how to face themselves. Not this idea of giving themselves uppercut in the mirror, but just to face themselves with a bit of uncomfortable truth. No judgment, because that's just this old school self demonizing mindset, but like just truth is adequate, truth is absolutely enough, and it's uncomfortable enough as well. But to learn to face oneself in that, and then to face oneself with compassion and love, it
Mm-hmm.
just makes for a more powerful man, more respected within the community, a greater giver, a greater lover.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that men certainly want. But I, in my own path, was this rigid man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were really good at it, weren't you?
Being a rigid man,
Yeah.
yeah, I worked my ass off.
Mm-hmm.
I drunk my emotions away. I projected my shit onto my family. Yeah. And I tried almost with all my resources to avoid facing myself, but I also was just trying to provide for my family as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize now that I wasn't providing them what they needed. I could take my kids to Disneyland 10 times a year, but it doesn't make up for my emotional absence.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequence, like the kind of lifetime cost investment of an emotionally absent man in a relationship or a family, is the almost guaranteed inheritance of the child's emptiness in their life, their sense of worth, because their father only tries to fix them all the time, or them not bringing their emotions to their father because he just says, rub some dirt in it, or no point crying about it, or is what it is, or he lives life through these sayings. That has a profound impact. And like, I've been able to excavate those consequences in my life, and now kind of talking about this stuff. Montanans have been, for the most part, quite open with these events I've been doing, and the documentary, which was surprising for me.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I was wondering about that.
yeah,
There are some really prideful, stubborn people here, loving people with great big old hearts. But, I think that the state of Montana, I could be wrong about this, but I know that alcohol is a huge, huge problem in this state. And I know that suicide is a huge problem in this state as well. And I know, I'm imagining it's probably a big part of that has to do with us being so isolated and having winter a majority of the year. So that is a legitimate problem in this state. I know. Well, I want to wrap up here. It's like part of me wants to wrap up and part of me doesn't. I'm curious right now where you are. What is the growing edge you're working on right now?
it's definitely been an edge doing these speaking events in Montana. The last year, the real growing edge for me has been giving myself space to not fill my calendar, to not be busy,
Mm,
to be in the emptiness, and to actually show up for my chiropractor appointments 3 times a week, my physio appointments, doing this real reset on my body, because I'd neglected myself and just also abused myself with hard work. That's been a big chapter for this year. And to be honest, that was excruciating. I would feel like some days I achieved nothing, and
mm,
then I would realize, like, I'm actually healing my body. That's the biggest achievement of my life, and I've been putting it off for so long. And I'll be the first person in my family to probably not have chronic pain and to be reclaiming health.
yeah.
My family's health isn't particularly great, and it's not a coincidence. It's our mindset towards
Mm-hmm.
self-care and self-worth.
Mm-hmm. So you're changing your value from what you do to who you are.
Yeah, 100%.
So many people attribute their value to what they do
It's
or
been
how
very
much of what they
uncomfortable.
give. Yeah.
It's been really uncomfortable to transition from what I do to just who I am, because it's been empty. And most of my friends are saying they're curious about what I'm going to do business wise, and then for me, it's like, I'm not ready for that yet.
Mm.
I'm resting from living in the Arctic Circle for 3.5 years. And I trust my ability to build a great business and to, support men to transform their life. That's what I'll be doing in 2026. But this 2025 for me has been more of the physical and practical healing, catching up to my spiritual healing, and just cleaning my life out, like making sure that my finances are quite smooth and manageable, and burning like these legal documents that I kept for this fear of court coming up, just clearing all of these things out that had this energy of fear and control. And I'd say preparing for 2026, but the area of growth for me, I think a big thing is going to be with how many people I can serve in 2026 and doing more of these events. And most of my clients have been women actually in the past.
Really?
Yeah. They've been more susceptible to developing a relationship with Mother Earth, and they don't necessarily talk about it before, but they talk about it afterwards, that they hadn't felt safe with a man. And then to be out in the wild with me where they actually can't control anything and they can't micromanage me because they don't know the skills that are required to live in the bush. It's this real feminizing experience for them, and kind of coming back home to who they are. And I've had a big focus on supporting men, but I kind of, part of my growth now for 2026 is to just be more open to what is actually presented to me in people coming and saying like, hey, you spoke about this topic or this program, I'm interested in that.
I just had another question pop up. I was going to end the interview, but then another one popped up.
Yes, ma'am.
So how has you getting to really know yourself helped you? I'll start with me first, because you might be like, where does that come from? I've noticed that as I've grown in many different areas of my life, when I come into a connection with another human, I feel like I have a clarity, a stronger clarity of understanding of that person sooner than I used to, because my brain isn't cluttered with all the stuff that it used to be. And I'm curious if you've had the same experience. Like, is your interaction and experience of humans different now than it used to be because of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I cleaned up how I related with myself, right? And then, so I mentioned with you about self-betrayal, and that might be giving myself a promise and letting myself down, eating crappy food, saying yes to social situations that don't benefit me, betraying myself at work, whatever it is. When I started to clean my life out of this, I started to trust myself more and know myself more. And when I have also gone through these practical processes of like meditating on average once a day, not drinking alcohol as just a conscious choice, and cleaning up what I take into my body, and I trust my body now. And it's this thing where, you know how you see like two dogs go up to each other and they're just getting a feel, and then they'll know if they can play or if they fight. I just fully trust my body now when I meet someone. Like, how do I feel with them? And because I've met all of my own shit, and a part of this, like knowing who I am, isn't knowing my favorite song or my favorite ice cream flavor. It's more like writing down in this journal, when have I manipulated someone? When have I taken advantage of someone's vulnerability? When have I lied because I was afraid of a consequence? Like answering these uncomfortable questions to look at my own less desirable traits right? As I started to look at that stuff within myself and acknowledge that, and then clear those behaviors out, when I meet someone, I just fully trust my body, and I'm like a child, and this kind of child dog in a way, where the dog is assessing that, but then a child is so free in how they express. And I know, like, I don't like this person, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to, but I just don't feel well with them. But then also I can sense, because I've looked at my own psychological shit, I can go, they seem a little bit manipulative to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I might feel good around them, I have this sense, but it's
Mm-hmm.
only because I've been able to meet that energy in myself that I can then see it in someone else. But then also I try to meet that with some openness,
Mm-hmm.
you know. How
Yeah,
do
it
I,
sounds like you're able to trust yourself more now than ever.
yeah, because when I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, how can I trust myself when I was so heavily addicted, and I
Mm-hmm.
justified it and bullshit
Mm-hmm.
myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your brain is probably a lot less foggy now than it was then anyway.
By clearing all that stuff out, I'm able to live such a higher caliber life.
Yeah. I I can't say I've done everything you've done, but I understand what you're saying for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. So when you sat down to meet with me today, what what did that inner child feel or think or say?
I felt really, and this is a really good reflection for where I am in life now. I feel so capable to come here and just meet you in the moment. Like I was at this moose saloon in Kalispell before, where they got the wood chips and the peanut crust on the floor.
Was that
And
a first for you?
yeah. This dark place, and I don't even know, like, I don't know fully the culture here, where if I go to the table or whatever, and
Yeah.
someone tells me, but I'm able to just be so much more in the moment than to think, oh no, I need to be here at this point in time, and I need to worry about her perspective. Like, I don't live in their head
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
I'm very free in
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I love that. I love the freedom that you found. It sounds like above all else, freedom, hope and freedom. Big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're able to share that with me and with my audience and with the world. And I hope that this interview helps someone out there. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to make sure that you get across before we leave? I don't know if I'll get to see you again.
Well, I might come back to Montana. We'll see.
I would love that.
I'm Montana curious now. My final thought is on, let's call it, the trend of man blaming. And there is a cultural trend over the last decades of just being more critical of men.
Mhm.
And I've I've spoken a bit in that direction today as well. But I just want to, if anything there needs to get cleaned up, it's like, I'm not critical so much of men and or women, but we're in this journey together, and I've had a focal point on the life arc of a man and the journey of a man. And I hope that I've been able to provide a space for the female listeners to see compassionately that maybe that man's not an asshole. Maybe he's just actually so afraid, and he's been afraid since he's 4, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's afraid of his own emotions. He's afraid of his woman's vulnerability. He's afraid of his friends not respecting him. So a lot of his life, he is having these edges of fear that he's navigating, trying to think his personality through.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just want to have a touch point of compassion in there for that man, which then obviously affects the community around him.
Mhm.
But it's common discussion on television shows or social media is being critical of men.
Mhm.
And I'm a great example of a man that suffered his own stubbornness, But then also there's a whole picture around that of the unsafety that I had and the emotional needs that I didn't receive and the pressure that I received and that kind of ingredient list that led me to that. So I'm certainly very compassionate and caring for the men at the same time that I'm asking them to stand into the fire of truth. And I just invite, both men and women to where they can connect with their own compassion for the struggles of men, even though the struggles of men can be catastrophically put onto those around them.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you saying that. I hope you write a book someday. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I've thought about it. I don't
You
know
know,
if
I lay out books and do book covers. I'm also a graphic designer. That's another job I do.
Yeah,
In
okay.
case you need someone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. That would be a great book to read.
Yeah.
Well, this is the longest interview I've had in quite some time, and I do appreciate you accommodating me on a long. I had a feeling this might be. I don't know why exactly, but there's a lot there, Lex. There's a lot there to talk about. And still, we could continue for another hour or two. But I am satisfied that the audience got a clear understanding of who you are. And I think you brought a lot to the table today to help people who are watching. At least I hope so. And that's my hope for the people watching. And I appreciate your time so much. You have been so gracious with your time.
Thank you for the platform.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for connecting me to your people.